The goal of this is to actually help my university students who are learning the basics of music theory and ear training. This particular series will focus mostly on the theory aspect of it, and I just wanted to provide some additional support for students who need a little more work. This series was really developed over several years teaching at the University of Nevada, Las Vegas, and I hope you enjoy it. All right, so today we're going to be talking about chords, triads, inversions, and figured bass. This is sort of the basis of tonal harmony. So triads. They consist of three pitches that are just stacked in thirds. Anytime you have something that's stacked in thirds, it could be a triad with three notes. It could be a seventh chord. In this case, it would be a major seventh. It could be an 11th chord. If I had enough fingers, I'd play it with one hand. It could be a 13th chord. As long as the intervals are stacked in thirds, so C, D, E, E, F, G, G, A, B, B, C, D, then you have tertian harmony. Now, when it comes to the classical and romantic period, we typically dealt with triads and seventh chords. Once we get into the 19th century, it starts to explode a little bit, and you start to have things like unresolved dissonances and more advanced techniques, which you'll learn about if you follow this series. So on the most basic level, a triad consists of three pitches that is stacked in thirds in close spacing. So what does close spacing mean? It means that between the bottom and the top note, you have less than an octave. You can't put any chord members in between the chord when it's in close position. So typically that's going to be in root position. Chords. The difference between a triad and a chord. A triad is actually a type of chord. So chords consist of three or more pitches and may not be stacked in thirds. A chord could be a seventh chord, could be a ninth chord, or an 11th chord. A triad is only three pitches. So your C major triad just has a note C, E, and G. That's it. If you add another third above that to create a more expanded tertian harmony, we're starting to get into the concept of chords and seventh chords. When we learn part writing, we typically do it with soprano, alto, tenor, and bass spacing. So the soprano is going to be the highest voice. The alto will be the second highest voice. These are both written in the treble clef. The tenor will be in the bass, and the bass will also be below the tenor in the bass. So I'm going to show you some examples of this as we continue through the lecture. So if you look at this triad here in the bottom left corner of your screen, this is a triad in root position. It is also in close position. So the notes are C, E, and G. I can't fit any chord members in between the C and the E or the E and the G. This is as close as you can get. There is a misconception where some theorists and even some books will talk about closed with a D, but that's not actually how it's pronounced. It's close. So it's close together. Close together is going to be, as you see on the screen here. Open position will be when you can fit chord members in between. It's a very basic concept. So when stacked in thirds in close position, you have to put your chords in close position. The parts of the triad can be identified by the root, which is the lowest note, the third, and the fifth. So stacking these chord members in close position is very important for actually being able to identify what chord you're dealing with. If I have an E as a bass note, a G right above that, and then a C about a fourth away from the G, that would not be in root position. So you absolutely have to be able to stack your triads in root position to figure out what quality you're dealing with. And that's something called inversions, which we'll get to in a minute. So the third is going to be the middle note of the triad when in root position. The third plays a role in determining the quality of the chord. In some ways, it's one of the most important chord members there is, because without the third, if I play C and G, I don't hear the quality. I need that middle note, the third, to create that major quality. And if I just take that third down a half step, it makes it minor. So the third takes this open fifth and it really adds color to it. You can even have diminished triads if you want to lower the fifth a little bit. So we're going to get into all the different types of triads, but it's very important that you are able to figure out how to stack all of your chords in root position. So the top note of the chord when in root position is what we're going to call the fifth. So these are all chord members. If I refer to the root, that's a chord member. It's the lowest note when stacked in root position. If I refer to the third, I'm referring to the middle note. If I talk about the fifth, I'm referring to the top note. Now, why is this important? Because these notes are not always going to be in root position. You might have an E as the lowest note. You might have a G as the lowest note. The chord would still be a C major chord as long as it has notes C, E, and G, but without stacking them in root position, we don't really know what type of chord it is. We have to be able to reduce them to their lowest form. So there are 4 basic triads that we're going to cover right now, but we've got a major, minor, diminished, and augmented. The major triad has kind of an open sound. The minor triad is just a little less open. It sounds a little sadder, some might say. Diminished triads have a little bit of a even more closed nature, and they are more dissonant in sound. The augmented triad is sort of like a major triad, but that raised fifth, as you see in the 4th measure there, it gives it a very dissonant sound. People will often confuse when they're first learning intervals the diminished and the augmented triad. So it's important to not only be able to identify these triads by the way they're written, you also need to be able to identify them by the way they sound. So one mistake that a lot of people make, and it's not so much a mistake in 20th century, but it's definitely a mistake in the classical period. If you have a C major triad, it should have the notes C, E, and G. There are enharmonic spellings you can use. So the notes C, E, and G could be spelled a different way. You could have a B sharp instead of a C. B sharp and C will sound the same, but since they're written differently, it's no longer a C major triad if the root is a B sharp. So you could have the notes B sharp, D double sharp, and F double sharp. That would be a B sharp major triad. So a B sharp major triad sounds like this. C major triad sounds like this. They're the same, but they're spelled differently. And the reason for these spellings becomes more apparent when we get into more advanced music. So it's very important that you use the concept of tertian harmony to stack everything in thirds. So I need to have the notes C, E, and G for any type of C triad. For major, it's C, E, G. For minor, as you see, it's C, E flat, and G. Diminished is C, E flat, and G flat. And augmented is C, E, and G sharp. And I'll teach you how to build these triads in just a moment. So triads can be identified using a few different ways. And each one of these methods is actually really important for understanding classical music. It's not enough to simply know that a major triad is stacked in thirds diatonically. Again, that's a concept for the musical core. So you also need to be able to identify your triads by scale degree number. You need to know that in a major scale, the first scale degree is a major triad if you build on the root of the scale. So let's say we have a C major scale, the root is C. So I can build a triad on that if I had my E and my G. The second scale degree starts on D. So I can build a triad on that using the key signature of C major. And that gives me a minor triad. The third scale degree also. You can build it in thirds. That is also a minor triad. So scale degrees in major and minor keys have qualities associated with them. And this is an extremely important part of tonal music because these tonalities, the major and minor tonalities, and in some cases diminished or augmented, help to push the music forward. A major triad traditionally is seen as very stable. A minor triad is less stable. It has more of a need to want to keep moving. A diminished triad is really unstable. You really want to keep that one moving forward. So there are 3 different ways that you can identify triads. You can use scale degree number, scale degree name, or scale degree quality. So the scale degree number, we're going to talk about the 3 ways to actually identify these. Scale degrees 1, 4, and 5 are going to be major. If you look at this chart below, you'll see the first scale degree starts on C. If you go up to the 4th chord, we call that the subdominant. That's also major. And then the dominant, which is a 5th scale degree, is dominant. It's also major. Scale degrees 2, 3, and 6 in a major key are going to be minor. And this is the same for any major key. So you should memorize the difference between your major scale degrees and your minor scale degrees. So your major scale degrees are going to be 1, 4, 5. Your minor are 2, 3, and 6. The diminished, there's only one scale degree that's diminished, and that's a 7th scale degree. And it has a strong need to want to resolve. The dominant also has a strong need to want to resolve. If I have a G major triad here, it wants to resolve to a C major triad. So these resolutions are really the basis of tonal music. You'll notice that the minor scale degrees and qualities are a little bit different. So scale degrees 1, 4, and 5 are minor within the natural minor scale. One thing that we do for the 5th scale degree is we typically have to raise the leading tone. So the leading tone is going to be the 7th scale degree when it's been raised. So if you look at the C minor scale listed here, you actually have a B flat for the 7th scale degree. If you raise that B flat to a B natural, now you have a leading tone. When it's left as a B flat, we call that the subtonic. So there's 2 different names for that 7th scale degree depending on whether it's raised or not. So if we had a minor dominant, it doesn't have the same pull towards a resolution. If we make it major, it just sounds a little more solid. It sounds like a stronger resolution. So we always try and raise the leading tone in the minor dominant. So you also need to memorize your scale degree names. In a major scale, you've got the tonic. The supertonic is the 2nd scale degree. The median is the 3rd. The subdominant is the 4th. The dominant is the 5th. The submedian is 6th. And the leading tone is 7th. Minor scale degree names are very similar. They're all the same with the exception of the minor dominant on the 5th scale degree and the subtonic on the 7th scale degree. If you use a natural minor scale to build chords, then the minor dominant will occur naturally when you hit that 5th scale degree. The subdominant will occur naturally when you hit the 7th scale degree. But remember, because we raise that leading tone, which in C minor is going to be B flat, we raise the B flat, the subtonic, to a leading tone, B natural, we get G, B natural, and D. So that becomes a major dominant, which is preferred. The subtonic, if you raise the root of the subtonic, you make it a leading tone chord, then you have the notes B, D, and F. It's the same as major. And that's the goal. Minor keys are considered to be minor and less pure than the major keys. And this goes back to the overtone series, which is something that I also discuss in the musical course. So that's a good course to kind of go over to get some of these basics so you can understand better why we have certain chords. So triads can be identified by their quality through the use of Roman numerals and something that we have lawyers to thank, a special term. We're going to get to that in just a minute. So your major scale degree Roman numerals though, notice that 1, 4, and 5 use Roman numerals. And then 2, 3, 6, and 7, because they're subsidiary to the major, they're weaker chords that are more unstable, we use lowercase Roman numerals. The minor scale degree Roman numerals are pretty much, you've got your minor 1, your 2, which is diminished, then you've got your 4, your 5, those are both minor, and the rest of them are going to be major or augmented. So this is where you can get a 3 augmented chord if you raise the leading tone of the 3 chord, which is going to be done very, very rarely in classical music. So the answer for this, triads can be identified by their quality through the use of Roman numerals and Romanettes. In the second part of this lecture, I'm going to get into identifying how you actually spell your triads. So we're going to talk about how you can spell triads by your intervals, major triads, and inversion. So if you need a break, now's a good time.